Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Little Fella Sports Podcast. As you can see, we've got Cricket Info's very own Gaurav Sundararaman, who's obviously an expert when it comes to T20 cricket in special, and we're very delighted at the Little Fella Sports Podcast to have him on the show. So, first things first, welcome to the show, Gaurav, and it's an absolute pleasure having you on today.
Thanks a lot, guys, for having me here. That time of the season again, where we celebrate the IPL. So, yeah, looking forward.
Yeah, as you mentioned, IPL is one tournament that every single cricket fan across the world will look forward to at this particular time of the year. Obviously, last year it was completely different. I mean, exactly a year back, the tournament was postponed and it happened in November. But this time it's back in India after a gap of more than 2 years, and finally we are into the IPL season. So I want to first talk about the auction. Having worked with a couple of IPL teams before, you've obviously had direct auction experiences before. So from that, I mean, we saw that in terms of trends and whoever went for more money, it was clear that when it comes to prices and demand and availability, it was clear that foreign fast bowlers, guys who could bowl 140 and guys who could bowl at the death, was the guys who went for most money, because that's something in the Indian market lacks, probably except for Jasprit Bumrah, right? So it was clear that that particular type of cricketer was what went for most. So what are your thoughts on that particular trend of those guys? It was not a surprise according to you, right? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, it is definitely not a surprise, and they always look to, especially Australia and Big Bash, for these as well. And that's exactly what happened. Jai Richardson and Riley Meredith, both of them went for a lot of money. And the other thing is, they kind of got influenced, I think, a lot of teams by 2020 IPL, where we saw Rabada and Nokia so well. So I guess 140 plus bowlers always helps in terms of uh, skill set to with the Indian batsmen. Sometimes they struggle, and if the pitch was like, uh, I would say, pace friendly, then these guys come into the picture. So yeah, like you said, it was expected. The kind of money which went was. Uh, I understand why it went, but I still wouldn't be paying so much without for these players who have never played the IPL before.
I agree. I mean, some of the names like Kyle Jameson and Jai Richardson. I mean, two guys who obviously had some international experience, especially Jai Richardson. He's proven to have done pretty well for Australia. But when you see with Kyle Jameson, he's done well in Test cricket and to an extent pretty well in one day cricket. But we've never seen a consistent run of performances when it comes to T20 cricket. And for RCB, for example, to let go of a proven performer like Chris Morris, who inevitably was the most expensive player in the auction, that wasn't a surprise, right? And then they went and nearly spent as much as 15 crores on Kyle James, and that was kind of a surprise. The other important or kind of role that teams try to fill was that middle order hitter, because obviously, again, when it comes to India, you probably got Hardik Pandya and to an extent maybe Rishabh Pant and Dinesh Karthik, who could fill those roles. Again, finishing from overs 14 to 20, that's the biggest issue. And it was not a surprise, but we saw Glenn Maxwell, for example, go for again massive money despite scoring just 97 runs with no sixes and performance like, I mean, it was a complete underperformance for Kings 11 Punjab last season. So thoughts on Maxwell in particular, and someone like Shah Rukh Khan, for example, going for pretty good money despite the fact that he's not played at a very high level before.
So this is not the first time it's happening. These kind of things happen every season. We saw once Pawan Negi went for what 8 to 9 crores. People don't go behind the name all the time. They go behind skill sets, and Shah Rukh Khan obviously is the skill set of an Indian hitter, Indian finisher. So that skill set is very rare. We don't know how he will turn up, how good he will be. He might also have a poor season, or he might have a really good season. So these are things you just take a punt. We don't know whether it's really going to work or not. Glenn Maxwell, even I would go behind him all the time, because I know he's had it bad. There might be some reason for that. It could be the same team, the environment, kind of role, the backing he gets, the role he wants to play. So, if you ask me, I would be uh, not surprised, and I understand why RCB have gone for Glenn Maxwell as well. They want more people to be there so that the dependency is not there so much on Kohli and AB de Villiers. Now, Kohli and ABD can play more freely uh, without that load, and wins them even 2 3 games. I think that's good enough.
Exactly. I completely agree about the fact that RCB really needed Maxwell, despite the fact that you have years of underperformance, basically nothing of significance since 2014 IPL. Still, he's continued to do really exceedingly well for Australia in the international circuit, and there was no one like him available in the market, someone who could take the pressure of AB and Virat Kohli, as you mentioned, and that was something despite the fact that they had to take the punt. And one important factor was that this is likely to be the last option of this particular cycle, and you're not necessarily stuck with these players as well, right? It's something you just, this is more like a one season issue. That's why you saw some players go above the market. Was that some sort of the reason, do you think? Because we've got the mega auction and potentially two new teams coming in next season?
See, the mega auction, I did find out from a few people whether the mega auction makes a difference. People don't think at all that way. It looks like it. I'm surprised, but they don't think because we don't know what the new rules are. They say sometimes two teams are coming. They say sometimes only one team would make it. So you can't. I don't think you can really plan for the future. Even though I would think that to identify some kind of talent. Uh, be it really young or be it really experienced, you would always want to have them 1 year before the big auction, just in case something happens. So I'm surprised they are not looking ahead, or maybe they don't tell it outside. But as a team, I would definitely be looking at a big auction and trying to build for the next few years. So getting any kind of player who you think give you an edge in the long run is totally worth punting on.
Fair enough. Now, obviously, I want to talk about the eight teams in particular. We'll start off with the Mumbai Indians. I mean, the defending champions, the two-time winners, of course. They are trying to do something. No team. I mean, only great sports team win three tournaments in a row, back to back to back. They can do something. I mean, something like Chicago Bulls or what Real Madrid did in the Champions League a few years ago. So Mumbai Indians are trying to do something which has never been seen in cricket, at least. Maybe Australia's World Cup is comparable, but obviously in an IPL, in a tournament like IPL where so many things are volatile, I think it's an incredible achievement that they go into this tournament again as massive favorites. So talking about Mumbai Indians, we've got the lineup in terms of where they play the games here. So here, as you can see, 5 games in Chennai, 4 games in Delhi, 3 games in Bangalore, 2 games in Kolkata. If you'd asked Mumbai Indians to pick venues where they'd not want to play, I think Chennai and Delhi would have topped two venues they wouldn't have wanted to play. So what are your thoughts on the venue split up, and how do you think it could affect their matchups and their playing lines also in terms of balance?
So it's actually a pretty surprising thing. You would think that they wouldn't want to play Chennai, but they're actually unbeaten in Chennai since 2011. So they haven't lost in Chennai. So I think MI have the team and is cricketing smarts for all the venues. It really doesn't matter. They will tend to adapt very quickly. So I don't think the fact that they're playing in Chennai, Delhi is going to affect their game, affect their style. They do have decent spinners in Kunal Pandya and Rahul Chahar. They have Jayant Yadav as well. So Mumbai as a team, I don't think the venue really matters. I think what you need to do is you need to close out some close games against them, win some big moments. And this year, a lot of teams will come well prepared to kind of counter Mumbai. So if Mumbai can, if Mumbai don't have a very good start, we've seen they don't have a very good start in most of the IPL season, but they finish very well. But I don't think venue is going to make a difference, but I'm sure teams are going to come much more well prepared against Mumbai than any other season.
I agree. I think one team to always watch out for this. You always have a team where you say, okay, they are a very strong team, but I think all 7 teams right now will be basically lining up their cards in terms of trying to beat Mumbai Indians. I think if you beat Mumbai Indians, I think you've got a genuine foothold of trying to potentially get to the playoffs and maybe further also as you get into the playoffs. So the other team I want to speak about is next is the finalists who obviously made it along with Mumbai. They lost 4 out of 4 against Mumbai though last season. So Delhi Capitals, in the absence of Shreyas Iyer, obviously Rishabh Pant's been given the captaincy. Do you find their auction buys solid enough to potentially overcome Mumbai this time around? And in general, how do you see them performing this season? What are your expectations for Delhi Capitals?
So Delhi are an interesting team. First of all, they lost Shreyas Iyer. That kind of changes the big balance of their team. You always had now you'll be forced to play Ajinkya Rahane. You don't know what to do with Steven Smith. You have two overseas quicks who you want to play to continue from last year's strategy. So the overseas is the problem because Imran Etmaya was batting too low down last time. Marcus Stoinis started opening towards the second half of the tournament, towards the end of the tournament. So there's a lot of options, but they really don't know what their best 11 in terms of playing roles are. So I really need some few things going their way, especially in terms of, I would think, mainly in terms of their bowling and the where to play Rahane, when to bring Rishabh Pant to bat, and how is Rishabh Pant's captaincy going to affect his batting. These are some of the questions. How to handle Smith and Rahane is a big challenge, and we don't know what we'll get, which Marcus Stoinis is going to turn up. So there are a lot of things which I won't say which are 100%, but if things go exactly like last season, then they start off well, then we have a good chance. But if you ask me personally, I don't. The bowling is, but I don't see them going all the way this time.
I agree. I think guys who did not have the greatest of seasons, I think Prithvi Shaw and Rishabh Pant in particular, I think have massive roles to play this season with the bat, especially because as you mentioned, you've got issues of you don't know where you're going to fit in someone like Rahane or Steve Smith because both are traditionally anchors, and after having someone like Shikhar Dhawan at the top, do you need another anchor at number 3? So you've got issues like that, and the fact that as you mentioned, Marcus Stoinis was actually used as an opener at the start of the season, but this time you probably have to fall back to Prithvi Shaw because Marcus Stoinis, you don't have a finisher to play that particular role, and you need some experience in the middle of the order as well. And you spoke about Hetmeyer. Do you believe that he should bat at 3 ideally? I know we're talking about ideal scenarios, but do you believe he should bat at 3?
If at all he plays, yes, but I don't think he can bat at 3 for this team.
Fair enough. Okay. Now moving on after Delhi, we're going to the team which Sunrisers Hyderabad, the team who consistently made the playoffs since 2016. They've made the playoffs every single year. This time they made interesting buys. You could argue that none of their buys potentially get into the starting 11. Do you believe that their 11 is strong enough to push Mumbai and eventually win the league, or do you think they could have done something different in the auction? They didn't have too much to play with in terms of burst, but do you think they could have done something different, something like foreign fast bowler, for example?
Not really. I think they're okay. They never used to play East Stanley anyway. The problem with the Sunrisers, I wouldn't call it a problem, but one of the key areas is which foreigners do you play? And you have Kane, Warner, Bastow, Rashid, who usually end up starting. Then they had a problem with the middle order, so which is why they got in Jason Holder. Uh, now they have Jason Roy as well. So uh, it's they're playing in Chennai and Delhi, so they want good players of spin and players who can bowl spin well. They have everything covered. So I don't think. I think SRH are very well placed, and they're kind of. I would also say with the kind of venues they have and the team they have, if it's slightly low scoring, I think it's very hard to beat.
But I think the games they thrive in are those 140, 150 games where the bowlers come into play, and basically Warner can make it as a matchup game. When you've got a bank like Rashid and someone like Bhuvneshwar Kumar, who seems to be very close to his best, if not at his best, after a couple of years of injury issues, I think that's a massive positive for them. The way he bowled for India in the last few months in the England series, I think it's a huge positive for them. And then you've got someone like Thangarasu Natarajan, who can potentially be the X factor. They don't have to rely on him as much as they did last season in the presence of Bhuvneshwar. And I think, as you mentioned, games which don't go to 180, 190 because the middle order, apart from an inexperienced Abdul Samad, you could potentially say has a little bit of lack of firepower, trying to cross something like 180, 190. But those games where which take place in Chennai and Delhi, I think they should be okay. I completely agree with you. The fourth team is we actually touched upon them a little bit at the start of the show itself. The team which made the playoffs last season, Royal Challengers Bangalore. They let go of Chris Morris. They let go of Aaron Finch, two of their biggest buys from the previous auction. They obviously got in Glenn Maxwell and Kyle Jameson for massive money. Apart from that, they've got the likes of Dan Christian, Daniel Sams, who traded in Harshal Patel. Guys like these, they've obviously retained someone like Kane Richardson as well. Do you personally believe their team has actually weakened from last season because of the presence of someone like Chris Morris, who, despite the fact that he didn't play 14 games, played such a huge role in those 9 or 10 games he played? And in terms of the venues they played, how do you see RCB lining up this season?
Tough question with RCB. It's very hard to predict anything. But if you ask me personally, I think they're okay. Uh, I don't think they've weakened their team because of Chris Morris. Chris Morris is very injury prone. We don't know what we are going to get from Chris Morris for sure. So I definitely feel that uh, RCB are pretty strong with their batting. I think their batting is totally covered. Uh, Pretty good. the bowling, especially dead bowling and the kind of bowling they don't have that one bowler which batsmen really be wary of. Only Chahal is the only one, and he's not been in the best of form. So their bowling can be half as good as what it was last season. Last season, their bowling was really good, to be very honest. So their bowling can even be like half or three-fourths of what they was last season. I think they have a great chance to make the playoffs. I think the batting this time will take care of itself, and I think the batting will do very well. So we have to wait and see if the batting can step up. So if there's some element of balance and they identify their best 11 very soon, I think RCB have a good shout to make the playoffs. Whether they go on to win, I don't know, but have a good chance to make the playoffs.
I agree. I want to just touch upon the batting. I agree that the bowling was outstanding last year. I think you could say that it was the best it's been for a very long time, probably since 2009 when they reached the finals back then. I think when they had the likes of Kumble, Zahir Khan, and all that. But in terms of batting, do you think the batting can really step up, especially in the middle? They had a massive issue of where they wanted to play AB de Villiers last season, and the fact that Virat Kohli was relatively slow in the middle. Do you think issues like that could crop up again? I know they've gotten Glenn Maxwell who could potentially solve that issue by batting between where Virat bats, which is likely to be opening, and where AB bats, which is probably going to be 4 or 5. Do you think Maxwell can take care of that issue of the slowdown in the middle overs? Sorry.
Yeah, I think that should not be an issue because I think Virat is not going to be easy to get out very early. He's playing very well. So Virat and Devdutt Padikkal should be able to bat 4, 5 to 6 overs, and then after that you have the AB show and the Maxwell show. So um, I think shouldn't be a problem with them. So batting, I'm fairly confident with Washington Sundar, Daniel Christian, Kyle Jamieson, and the other Indian batsmen, whoever they pick. I think they're kind of sorted that way.
Fair enough. So talking about the bowling, if there's one guy who could potentially step up being the main guy in the death, especially, who could it be? Could it be Jameson or maybe a Navdeep Saini who's done that role previously as well for them?
Personally, if you ask me, I will not even start with Jamieson. I'll play Kane Richardson. I think Kane Richardson has a lot of variety in the depth. When it just gets slow, especially in India, he's done pretty well many times. So you don't want to start the tournament trying to play Jamieson and see what he is capable of. I think we have to start with Kane Richardson and then maybe move on to Kyle Jamieson later in the tournament. That's what I would do. I think Kane Richardson will be handy there.
Fair enough. I agree with you. I think Kane Jameson, especially because you've got guys like Siraj and Saini who are potentially better used with the new ball, and you've got even like Washington Sundar who's probably going to do that role, especially at Chepauk, right? So Jameson's value as such could be reduced, and you could expose him to overs where he's not used to being bowled at. So that's something we saw even in the Australia series. Whenever he got bought into the death overs, whenever he's bought and bowled in during the death overs, he got carted for runs very badly, and his value is probably up there during the new ball phase. The next team obviously is the team which finished fifth, Kolkata Knight Riders. I feel that they've perennially underachieved for the past 2 or 3 years with the quality of players they have there and the balance. Because you look at KKR lineup, you can't say there's an obvious weakness. You can probably say there's a little bit of lack of firepower at the top, but apart from that, the bowling is well rounded. They've got probably the best middle order in the entire tournament as well. What do you think has gone wrong with KKR for the last 2 years, and do you think that they can get across those issues this time around and potentially make the playoffs and further as well this season?
In my opinion, they do too much of swapping and changing. I think that's quite a problem with KKR. Whenever they've had a kind of a settled unit, they know their roles. They've done pretty well. They've always been just a win away from the playoffs over the last few seasons. So it's not like they've been really bad, but they've also maybe not won the key moments. They have had to scrape through towards the second half of the tournament. For starters, I think playing Pat Cummins, for example, at number 7 is too early for Pat Cummins. So they need to figure out the balance. They need to figure out who are the bowlers who are going to bowl them 4 overs. They have to find out where Russell and Narain stand in terms of fit, in terms of what they can offer the team. So I think Russell's going to have a great season this time. So in fact, I think I see KKR do very well as well. This time, the playoffs is very hard to predict, but I think KKR will go one step further from last few seasons this time around because they just need to get their team in order from the first game. If guys like Varun Chakravarti, Russell, all of these guys are on top form in the beginning itself, I think they do very well.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's too many quality players for them not to get it. I mean, because if they just get it a little bit right here and there, I think they've got too many quality players not to make the playoffs. Because you've got so many other teams who've got so many balance issues. With KKR, it's almost there. It's just that one or two spots who probably have to perform that 10 or 20% extra, and they obviously need to avoid issues like Russell getting injured or Narayan having those bowling issues. Because I personally
For
believe.
example, last time they bought in Loki very late. Uh, they bought in Varun also pretty late. So thing is, you need to nail the batting position. Dinesh Karthik batted, I think, across all possible positions in the team except for opening it. So hopefully this time those problems are ironed out.
Yeah, I think someone like DK is probably best suited to come from overs 14, 15 onwards. They even batted him at 3, for example, I think last season in the first few games, and that's definitely not a role DK is too comfortable with, and he's not performed too highly in that role. I think as even towards the end of the season when he was back at 4 and 5, he finished those games beautifully for them, and that's where his best view. So I completely agree with the fact that KKR definitely have the potential to show the most improvement in performances because they've got that quality. The next team is obviously Punjab Kings, obviously formerly known as the Kings 11 of Punjab. They had a roller coaster of a season to say the least. First 5 or 6 games, they somehow contrived to lose some of them. They were on the verge of winning and they somehow managed to lose them. And then they went on a beautiful run. They won 5 games in a row. And just when they were about to make the playoff, they were a game or away from making the playoff. They lost the last 2 games. So Punjab last season, you could say to an extent overperformed with the quality of bowling lineup because personally I felt their worst bowling attack in the entire competition. So what do you believe they've made enough signings because they had the most money heading into the auction? And what do you make of Punjab Kings this season? Do you think they can push to make the playoffs this season?
Yes, again, another team which just missed the playoff. They have all their strategies right. Okay, they know what they're doing. They were not able to close out games. Even if they had won a couple of games early on, they would have qualified. Punjab know exactly what they're doing. They have a good think tank and they have a good grasp of T20 cricket. Just that this time, I'm only not too confident about their bowling. A lot of rookies, no really experienced bowler there. We need to kind of see how all these bowlers come back and do, especially in the death overs in key phases of the game. So Shami is coming back from an injury. Jai Richardson has never played in the IPL. Ravi Bishnoi faded off towards the second half of last year's IPL. Multan Ashwin, Riley Melded, we don't know what he's capable of. Chris Jordan. So we need to wait and watch how their bowling shapes up. A lot of teams this year, especially Kolkata, Bangalore, Punjab, they're all going to be highly dependent on how their bowling shapes up. I think all these teams, the batting will do very well.
I agree. So you're not sure. It depends on how those guys who potentially who've been bought in the season, likes of Riley Meredith and Jai Richardson guys, they probably need to step up. And someone like experienced guys like Mohammad Shami needs to continue to perform at a very high level for Punjab to have a chance. I completely agree with you. The second last team is obviously the Chennai Super Kings, a team which has consistently found a way to make playoffs, make finals. But last season was one of those seasons where nothing pretty much went for them. They pretty much got. I mean, I know they won a few games towards the end, but their season pretty much unraveled at the very beginning itself. So, what do you think of CSK? Do you believe that there's been enough change from 2020 in terms of playing personnel and do you think that this season could be different, or do you see this as more of an extension of what happened last year?
We don't know what we're going to get with Chennai. So it's going to be super, super hard to predict. There's one team which is so versatile that the 11 is very, very hard to predict. Nobody can tell who's going to play. So they have a lot of options and they need to be smart. A player like Dhoni knows what he's doing, so he's not going to change his ways and means. I think they will continue with the tried and tested process of playing Faf and Ruturaj and trying to see assess the conditions and then look for the potential score because that's worked for them most of the time. So, so I don't like to say this, but I don't see him changing the process. I think he's going to continue the same way. Hopefully the personal deliver this time. I think bowling last time was a letdown. So hopefully this time the death bowling, especially death bowling, was a big letdown last time, and the spinners completely were out of the game. So hopefully the spinners and the death bowling get sorted. CSK can definitely compete.
Fair enough. Do you think that the fact that they're playing in somewhere like Wankhede and Bangalore also, venues which are traditionally known to go for 180, 190, 200, those games generally don't suit CSK, right? Do you think that could be an issue as well? Because as you mentioned, the lack of firepower through the batting lineup, a reliable
Yeah,
player
it
is not there.
could. Definitely, it could. You're spot on there. I'm 100% sure it could, which is why they need to adapt. They need to realize that this game is going to go, it's going to be high scoring. So, how do we deal with this? Is to try to swap and change. I think I just want Dhoni to be slightly more unpredictable this time. Uh, if he becomes predictable, teams are easily able to strategize. So, we need to wait and see if he does that or not.
And also, one thing is, as you mentioned, they have so many options. Almost impossible to say who could play. You could almost say there's about 18, 19 players with a genuine chance of playing in the 11 in terms of their potential and what they've done so far. And as you mentioned, it's very difficult to say what they could do. And the depth of batting also, whoever they play, I think they're nailed on to have a batting lineup which is going down to 9 or 10. And that at least should ensure that they go with a very, very positive approach at the top of the inning, especially in grounds like Wankhede.
Last time, if you notice, Jadeja, for example, hardly played about 100 balls or so. I'm not sure the exact numbers, but he hardly played a lot of deliveries. So even though they have batting till 9, they need to make good use of it. So we need to wait and see if that really works for them or not.
I completely agree. And yeah, as you mentioned, I think CSK need to adapt and reinvent themselves to have a really positive season. Because if they don't, as you mentioned, they could get exposed very early and things could unravel. And you could say that with the kind of players they have, if things go bad early, you don't know whether they'll be able to fight back and make a comeback towards the second half of the season and stuff like that. And finally, the last team which we're talking about, a team which obviously finished bottom last season but have incredibly exciting players. They've had probably one of the most impressive auctions we've seen in recent times, at least according to my opinion. Of course, I'd love to know your opinion about that. So what do you make of Rajasthan Royals? They obviously went and got the likes of Shivam Dubey. Chris Morris was obviously their marquee buy. Jofra Archer is expected to miss at least the initial part of the season. So how do you see that affecting them? And in general, what do you make of the Rajasthan Royals? The option buys they made, the balance they have right now, letting go of someone like Steve Smith as well.
But as soon as the auction got over, I really thought that they have a very, very well balanced team and they kind of filled a lot of gaps. But with Archer going out and Morris also very injury prone, we don't know whether Morris can be at the same impact as Jafra. So, and the middle order looks very, very bad. You have Stokes, you have Butler, then you have Sanju Samson, and then literally there's nobody else after that. You have Shivam Dubey, Rahul Tiwari. All these guys are not guys who have proven yet consistently in an IPL tournament. So we need to wait and see how their middle order share. If Sanju, Butler, and Stokes don't perform, uh, I don't
Things
think
look a little
Arara
sticky.
are going to go all the way. So what I thought immediately after the auction was Rajasthan Royals were a solid team uh, with a lot of bases covered. Last time their batting did very well, but it was their bowling which let them down. The support for Archer was not there at all.
Non.
Uh, so this time around, if you personally ask me, I don't think Rajasthan uh, will go all the way. I think they will struggle to make the playoffs unless we see some kind of unbelievable star performances by the batsmen or those Indian players they rely on come up.
I mean, yeah, as you mentioned, someone like Rahul Tewatia probably needs to almost at least replicate
Replicate the
70 to
same.
80% of what he did last season. The likes of Shivam Dubey, Riyan Parag, who they've invested quite a lot in the last few years, he needs to probably step up. And as you mentioned, their Indian bowling, Karthik Tyagi, they've got in Chetan Sakkari. I'm not too sure about Jaydev Unadkat being a reliable option for a very, very long time. But as you mentioned, if someone like Jofra Archer can make it with 5 or 6 games to go, that could provide them the boost. Because if he's there with say 6 games to score and you need to win 4, that's something you could see them doing, right? Because the
But
quality of the bowling lineup.
you need to understand that Jofra Archer will be coming back from a big break without any bowling and all that.
That's
We
true.
don't
And
know.
the quarantine also.
I doubt Archer will turn up, but let's see. Who knows?
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, as you mentioned, there were things were looking good for Rajasthan, but that Archer injury could genuinely jeopardize a lot of things because of the kind of replacements they have, almost non-existent in terms of level of quality. I completely agree with you. And finally, moving on to your predictions right now. You've given kind of what you believe for each team, what are the issues and what they could potentially go wrong for them as well. So first things, I want to ask about the best batsman, or you could say an orange cap, whichever you prefer. I don't know which one you want to, but either an orange cap or the best batsman. Because for example, KL Rahul for me was not the best batsman last season, even though he won the orange cap. So it could be anything. So your best batsman for you.
So for the purpose of this prediction, let's keep it easy. I'll just tell you who's likely to score the most runs. Uh, I think it'll be Virat Kohli.
Fair enough. And bowlers, most wickets.
Most wickets, going to be a tough one. I think this time I'll go with Bumrah.
Bumrah. Fair
He's
enough.
never really won the purple cap.
Fair enough. And finally, I want to talk about the playoffs, of course. I can understand if it's not a particular order you want to go with, but after all your analysis and what you've told about each of the 8 teams, who do you think are the best placed 4 teams to head into the playoffs and potentially? I mean, we'll talk about the title towards the end, but best 4 teams who you think are best placed to reach the playoffs?
It might be a surprising answer, but my four, as of now, as in, uh, I have not really done as much analysis yet, but I like the look of MI, SRH, and RCB. Uh, Fourth spot is going to be pretty tough, but I think KKR might take it this time.
Fair enough. And in terms of, as in, I mean, obviously, we talked about the fact that Mumbai Indians were going for an incredible treble, a hat trick of wins. Do you think that's very likely to happen? Do you see any of the other 3 teams you mentioned potentially fight for that particular title? And how do you see it going?
I just somehow feel this time MI will not win it. But if they do, they, like you said, they're truly giants and champions. So uh, hopefully they don't, but who knows?
If you had to pick a team which could potentially usurp them in a final or a playoff game, also out of those 3, SRH, RCB, KKR, if you had to, just a small prediction, who would it be?
SRH.
So, fair enough. So thanks a lot, Gaurav. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I know you've taken out time for us. So thanks a lot, guys. Please do. I hope you guys really enjoyed the show. Thanks a lot to Gaurav once again. So please do like, share, subscribe to the channel. We've got a lot of content lined up. And thanks a lot, Gaurav, once again. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Have a good IPL.